Welcome to DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. This is part 2 of my run-through of the Ravenloft Mist Hunters modules, the Adventurers League stuff that came out alongside Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which often contain more flavour, location info, quests, monsters, NPCs, beyond what's listed in Van Richten's Guide. So it's kind of handy to dig into it if you're thinking of running some of the domains it covers, or whether it be as part of a domain hopping campaign or a one-shot. The premise is that the great detective Alan Gray, sort of like Ravenloft's answer to Sherlock Holmes, sends the PCs to do different quests around the domains of Dread. This video will cover Ikath, Valachan, Mordent, and Darkon. So if you're running those domains, you probably want to watch this and see what they include. And if you don't want to watch it all, you just want to watch certain sections because you're only interested in a certain domain, for example, there's timestamps in the description. Modules 7 and 8 are Ikath, modules 9 and 10 are Valachan, module 11 is Mordent, and module 12, and the final one, which is known as Extended Play 2, are Darkon. I included links to them all individually and the bundle in the description, and 2 map makers who I believe have covered all the modules, providing maps for them. A quick reminder that part 1 covered the domains of Daemonlu, Cartacus, Volkovnia, Heart Ikea, and Barovia. And a quick disclaimer, I can't remember if I said this last time, but probably should have done. I'll try and explain stuff as I go, but this kind of presumes you have a bit of knowledge about Ravenloft already, some of the places, some of the people, etc. Maybe you own Van Richten's Guide and you flick through and looked at some of the domains. So I'm not going to go to the effort of explaining who everything is and a whole overview of each domain, kind of going into this assuming you know some of that. If I start explaining stuff and you're not quite sure, it might be worth just having a quick look at the book or other resources online, potentially other videos. Module 7 is called The City of Dreams, and it's the first of 2 Ikath ones. In the previous module, when they were in Barovia, they learned about something called the Urn of Dreams, and Alanik thinks it's in the library in the Palace of Bones in Ikath and sends the PCs there. Ikath is described as, and I quote, a desolate city with streets that are notoriously difficult to navigate. Some say the city's streets change while those within aren't looking and are filled with strange, terrible creatures that waylay anyone they find. Ikath's never really appealed to me, maybe because there's no map. I do love a good map, but by the sounds of it, the whole concept of it is that it's ever-changing and locations are moving, so it sounds pretty unmappable anyway. They got to go through the city, get to the palace, and get the urn. But they mustn't enter the palace until after sunset, once the nightingale bell rings, because undead roam the palace before sunset, but the bell's chime drives them out into the city. So it's that kind of timing issue. If they time it just right, all the undead sort of pass them and go into the city, so they kind of miss undead on both sides. And the city is guarded by Jianxi. That's Xian Shang's undead servant. Xian Shang is the Darklord. And if the PCs fall asleep in Ikath, they risk slipping into a dream world within Ikath and can be trapped there forever. It's kind of giving me Inception vibes. They're given the Bad Man's Gambit, a magical backpack for storing and carrying the urn. It's a reworked handy haversack, but it hides items inside that can't be divined or scryed on. Plus there's a chance of random potions that can be pulled out. But anytime it's used, there's a 1 in 10 chance that the Bagman appears and attacks, and they suggest the Venom Troll stat block for that. If it's defeated, it goes back in the bag and can reappear the next day onwards again, so they can't fully defeat it for good. They enter Ikath through a gate that closes behind them and they are trapped. They can't go back through it, later vanishes. Gives dimensions, terrain, lighting, sound, smells, etc. info. This is what I really like about these guides. Obviously, Van Richten's Guide gives us some information about the domains, but this gives us so much more detail about what the place is like and what kind of ambience you can expect. Some ambient haunt options. Streets change as they go through it. That's a cool idea. Plus some others. Palace of Bones is always visible though, so it can be used as a landmark. That's handy. Eventually, they meet a commoner called Shi, coming out of a mansion, scared of something. Explains that they were in the mansion, but if the PCs explore it, it's largely empty. But you can add it. It says you can add an encounter if you want. Shi is untrusting, but can give a bit more info and exposition, but doesn't stay with the PCs long unless they earn Shi's trust. Plus, they don't want to go with the PCs to the palace because it's dangerous. And they can learn a bit more about the scary Jianxi as well. There's box text explaining that Ikathans are, and I quote, paranoid insomniacs. Plus there's an encounters in Ikath table where 3 optional encounters and 1 definite one can be used to move the story along. Mystery in the Mansion involves Grimishkas, multiple Varguil. I've always thought those monsters look cool. They look really weird, really good. And 2 Vampiric Mists. Adrift in the Dream involves an Alep and 2 Spectres, unless they help 3 Phantasms to find their homes and bodies in time. The Abandoned Dead involves an undead creature begging the characters to eulogize some dead people, requiring a performance check. If they succeed, it's all good, but if they fail, they fight a Rutikin plus some swarms of maggots. and escape the Jiangshi. This is the definite encounter you have to include. Involves 2 Jiangshi chasing the characters. It's made out to be a deadly encounter, so the player should hopefully flee. And there's 2 tables tied to that. There's a running complications and hiding complications table, and it gives info about ending the chase. They arrive at the palace's gates, but the Nightingale bell rings, and there's a con save, or they succumb to it. Even people who can't hear are affected, and even those who can't be put into a magical sleep, such as elves, half-elves, presumably species that don't need sleep, are also affected. And failure means 1 level of exhaustion. Next chapter involves getting to the tower from the walls. The gates are made of human femurs formed into bars. That's pretty metal. They're magical, and there's guidance on various skill checks on how to get past them. Area features, so more info about the lights, sounds from the garden, as well as ambient haunt suggestions. There's also a body taker plant and podlings encounter, and an Anis Hag encounter. But interestingly, they use the art for Magantha from Curse of Strahd, although it's not a combat encounter necessarily. She can tell the PCs how and where Lady Xiang's 4 daughters can be found. There's also info about some stuff she can do that may harm the PCs, including how if they killed the body taker plant from before, she'll be annoyed by that. Then they reach the tower doors. Next chapter is about finding the daughters. If the PCs are kind and respectful to them, they'll help, each providing a different piece of handy info about what's to come. There's also guidance of using group checks to coax the info out of them. It also says that if you want to extend play and add more, they can help the 4 daughters to find peace and sleep. The first one is at the city's markets and tells them that they've been tracked by a quote, dark waking spirit. Second one is in a garden on the tower's grounds and tells them that the library is at the rear of the palace, so they know where it is within the palace. Third one is in the boughs of restless slumber and tells them that the urn is warded and can alert their mother if it's removed from the library unless it's first placed in something that conceals it, such as that bag they got. The fourth one is only used if extending play, tells them that there's a guard in the library and how to handle it. Then part 1 of the adventure ends as they reach the Palace of Bones. RMH8, the Palace of Bones, is part 2 of Ikath, essentially. There's 5 gates, one of which is trapped with a glyph of warding that does a phantasmal force type effect. It also gives an overview of the castle's layout, but there's no map, sadly. Perhaps the ever-changingness nature of it again, as talked about before. Then there's a Wall of Bone, which is also a trap. A ghosty gold dragon appears. PCs can be frightened by it, and it can do thunder damage. Inside the palace, they have to find the library. There's a D10 random encounter table, including a ghost, Jiangshi, crawling claws, and a few non-combat things. And a D10 competing interests table where they're aware of a nearby presence. It says things like you hear footsteps or someone feels breath against their skin. This, I feel, could be handy for if you're running something like the House of Lament or Mordent. So even if you're not running Ikath and have access to this, you might want to check that out, because I think for a haunted house or spooky setting, those kinds of things could be really useful. It says that the entity that had previously possessed Radiga and Sheelith, I talked about this in part 1, now controls someone called Vera and has info for her and some things you're meant to keep track of in the background, as she may inadvertently wake up Xian Shang if she's not awake already. Also, is this the first time you've heard about this entity? I knew that obviously people have been possessed before, but now we got a clearer idea of why and how. Oh, I remember seeing some reviews that someone left on DM's Guild for various modules complaining that it felt like DMs weren't given the full story. It's not just PCs who are kept out of the dark until the information is revealed, but even the DMs aren't sure. Where's this story going? Should I be knowing about this stuff in advance? It feels like information is being withheld. Not sure if that's a design issue or they're just trying to like spook the DM as well or get the DM intrigued. I don't know. But I can see what they mean now by that review. There's some palace exterior location information, including watchtowers that can contain Jiangshi. And they meet Minister Scion, a, quote, Jiangshi bureaucrat. I don't know about you, but I'm picturing a dude with a briefcase. And a mausoleum containing a crypt, quote, suffused with chaotic magic. Any spell cast in the crypt has no effect, but triggers a wild magic surge. That's great. I love wild magic stuff. An encounter with a stone cursed, and if it's killed or cured of its curse, the killer/curer gets the curse instead, and there's information about the stone cursed's curse. Next, the palace halls. Great flavour and description for the palace right off the bat. There's 6 area descriptions, one of which leads to the library. And the highlights of those areas include a nightmare trap, casting seeming, and Otto's irresistible dance on the PCs if they fail a charisma saving throw, taking on the appearance of Jiangshi and being forced to dance for 1 minute. And there's a puzzle to find the secret door to the library where the PCs have to light 4 lanterns in a certain order tied to the 4 daughters. And if they get it wrong, 2 ghosts appear and attack. But if they're placated, they could potentially help them figure it out. And when they find the secret door, they can find a wand of fiery spirits, which is like a brazier of commanding fire elementals, but also heavily obscures the area around it when used. Next, the library. The curator is an iron golem who can be awakened, and then the PCs can try and hide from it or try and kill it. And they may see Vera, the possessed person mentioned earlier. There's 2 sublocations to the library, the stacks and the vault, the latter of which contains the urn. There's another puzzle, a clue of which is found in a poem in the stacks. Whether or not they get the urn, as Vera can get it before them, they learn of Valachan, which leads on to the next 2 adventures. All they need to do now is escape Ikath. The Darklord keeps her borders closed at all times, but they can escape through the 4 Trees Gate, which the 4 daughters can help them find. And that's Ikath done. So if someone wants to run Ikath, I think there's a lot here you can play with that I think would be really useful for running the domain. RMH9, the Deadliest game. So I've run parts of this one and the next one before, because they are Valachan themed, and I ran Valachan in my campaign. Talk about it all in my How I Ran Valachan video. This is very much focused on Valachan's Trial of Hearts. So when I ran the Trial of Hearts, I borrowed heavily from this. I said it in that video and I'll say it again, I love the chapter titles in this. The introduction's title is Welcome to the Jungle. The next chapter is We've Got Fun and Games. The next chapter is If You Want It, You're Gonna Bleed, but It's the Price to Pay. Does that sound familiar? If you're a fan of Guns N' Roses, it's the lyrics from Welcome to the Jungle. This one starts with them in Valachan Jungle, where they're being chased by werepanthers who might capture them or knock them out. Whether or not they're captured, they reach Ocello, one of the settlements. Then there's a flashback to Alnic's Chateau, where Cabe and Radiga tell them what they need to do and where they need to go. There's also a cool magic item, Abitios's Machete, which is a magical scimitar that doubles as a Vorpal sword. Nice. But the wielder takes a small amount of necrotic damage each time they hurt someone with it, as the machete drains their blood. Also, on a natural 1, leeches on the handle animate and crawl down the wielder's throat. Gross, love it. Which can cause exhaustion. So chapter 1, they're in the settlement of Ocello. There's info for the place, more so than what's in Van Richten's guide, plus descriptions of what the Valachani people look like. They're healed from the previous encounter, if they were hurt or KO'd from those werepanthers. And the village is welcoming, and the villagers there are really excited. They're curious about new arrivals, but also pleased to see new contenders for the next Trial of Hearts. There's a D10 Rumours Heard table, but I don't think it tells you how and when to roll in it, how many times, unless I missed it. They meet the opposition for the Trial of Hearts, as there's 2 other teams, so 3 teams overall, the PCs plus these other 2. The Cuspishi, who are 4 warriors from Shurun, the other main settlement, and the Misplaced, who are 5 lost souls who ended up in Valachan. They include a half-elf ranger type, a human bard, a human pirate, a Gif, and a Thrikreen. Chikuna arrives. She's a Darklord of Valachan. She lays out the rules for the next Trial of Hearts. Similar info to what's in Van Richten's guide, but there are some slight differences. And a big difference is that there's usually 2 shrines, but only 1 shrine is in play. In this one, it's the Kiru Island Shrine. And I'll show a map showing roughly where they start and need to get to, which kind of shows the route they have to take to get to the shrine. Chapter 2, the start of the trial. Gives some jungle terrain and lighting info, plus info about how passive perception is always at a disadvantage, and flying creatures are hampered if they try and fly above the jungle canopy. It explains that Chikuna and her fellow werepanthers will be following the PCs and other teams throughout the trial, and there's a hunter's score mechanic, which depicts the PC's ranking in the trial. They can gain or lose points, depending on their actions when they go through it, and if they get a -3 score or break a rule, Chikuna catches up to them. Trigger warning now for amputation. Rather than kill them, she says, I'll take an arm. When she does that, when someone volunteers, or I think if they don't volunteer, she chooses someone at random, they take damage, 2 levels of exhaustion, and there's mechanics for how to adapt with a missing appendage. I'll quickly run through the encounters for the trial. Bridge of Ants. Large groups of ants are trying to get 2 dead crocodiles over a ravine, as you do, which the PCs can use as a bridge, plus you can add Periton and a giant ape if you wish. Jeweled Basilisk Lake. There's actually 2 routes here. If they go along the shore, they come across a statue with jewels on it, and if they loot anything from the statue, they're stunned for an hour, costing them lots of valuable time. Or they can cross the lake in some canoes, and partway along they can encounter a hydra. Mana Alin Mayu, a 400-foot high waterfall that's the start of the Irabamba River, and they can either try and climb it down the rocks either side, or you can go down the waterfall in a boat, and bad things can happen. It's kind of like pros and cons. It's probably just cons for both approaches. Bad things can happen no matter which way they go. It's a lose-lose situation. Juan's Creek, a quick one where an axolotl can lead them some treasure. Gruesome Graveyard, this one is gnarly. A bog full of gore and corpses, and one of the Shurin hunters is stuck in it, and you can either decide, or the PCs can decide to help her or leave her. And in my game, my players decided to help her, which breaks one of the rules of the trial. You're not supposed to help out teammates on the other teams, which triggered a Chikuna encounter, which meant one of them had to sacrifice an arm, and the one who decided to rescue her was the one who volunteered. And regardless of whether or not you help that participant, they die anyway. And then there's also giant wasps, a zombie clot, and swarms of zombie limbs that can be there. Tree of Heroes. You see some seemingly injured adventurers who aren't members of the Trial of Hearts, who are actually podlings in a body taker plant in disguise. They can choose to either ignore it or fight it. My players chose to ignore it. Dragon's Rest, an area Chikuna doesn't know about where the PCs can rest. And there's a random encounters table if you want to add more. But this is only the first half of the trial. The rest of it continues in what is essentially Valachan Part 2. RMH 10, Scion of Darkness, continues the Trial of Hearts and concludes Valachan. There's a Crossing the Cove section that covers getting to the island. Depending on how things went before, there's either enough canoes for all contestants or possibly not enough. It depends on if the other teams beat them to it. There's a wisdom check to cross, and those who fail risk exhaustion. And you can add an optional giant shark or chimera encounters to it as well. There's info about the island, Kiru Island, monsters including death's heads, man traps, and optional displacer-based encounters. There's a great encounter with the Misplaced. That's the group of participants who were all like random people, outlanders and outsiders from the domain. So you fight the human bard, Gif, Thrickgreen, human swashbuckler, and half ranger archer, who use those stat blocks but with edits to them. And it tells you the Gif starts things off by throwing a frag grenade. That is cool. And the Thrickgreen hides in and then jumps out of a pile of dinosaur poo and then attacks, which is great. Plus, that dinosaur poo is a bit of foreshadowing for something I'm going to talk about in a minute. And you can extend play by having 2 of the 5 lure the PCs deeper into the jungle and potentially into other traps. Then they reach the shrine, and a giant dinosaur called Kshimali appears. It's a T-Rex with legendary actions, high AC due to some armor or barding it wears, and a fiery beam ranged attack thanks to a magic ruby on its head. That is so cool. And the barding can be looted afterwards as a shield, albeit a cursed shield. Because this is Ravenloft after all. As an optional thing, you can add the surviving members of the Cuspici, the other group, attacking from the sidelines, who all end up dying one by one off screen thanks to Chikuna. There's also an amber sarcophagus at the shrine that offers a dark gift called Predator's Soul, gives proficiency in stealth or survival. There's a bonus action, you can choose a creature you see within 60 feet, and you have advantage on the next weapon attack you make against them, and the attack does extra damage. And after any attack roll, ability check or saving throw you make, roll a d20. On a 1, you become overtaken by the Soul Prey's last memory, and you are stunned for 1 minute as you relive the hunter's last moment over and over. But you can repeat the saving throw at the end of each turn to end it early. The vestige in the sarcophagus is the Scion of Darkness, which is the thing that possessed Radiga, and the others, it's finally explained. PC can take it, and while they still have their own agency, there's some info about how it affects them, so the DM is meant to talk to the player about this, saying if they let it possess them, they essentially become an NPC under the DM's control, so that player would have to make a new character to continue playing, or they can resist the possession and just carry on with their PC as normal, but I think they can still carry the Scion without being possessed by it. Then lastly, they go to Pantara Lodge, which is Shikuna's base. There's a feast, some chatter, and they can leave with Cabe escorting them home. And that's the end of Valachan. RMH 11, Calling Upon the Dead. This one's brand new to me as I record this, having only skim-read parts of it in the past. This one takes place in Mordent and involves a seance. It starts at Heather House in Mordent, which is the home to the weathermay-foxgrove twins. It's nice flavour and info for Heather House, and I wish I had this for when I included a brief visit to Heather House in my campaign with my players. The seance begins as Jennifer and Laurie establish contact with the spirits of an adventuring group who died while attempting to prevent the apparatus from being activated long ago, who can only find true rest if they're able to find the Rod of Hutras and destroy the apparatus. The apparatus is like this sort of powerful artifact from old Ravenloft as well as 5th edition that supposedly can do a number of things, but a lot of Darklords like the idea of trying to use it to escape the domains of Dread, and I think that's Aslin's goal. And in my campaign, I had Haslick from Haslan try and do it as well. PCs each play in this adventure as what's called Spirit Adventurers, for I think almost all of the story, if not all of the story. So they don't play their regular PCs. They can choose from one of 5 options: a wizard from Barovia, an adventuring scout, a Mordant-born warrior, a cleric from a seafaring family, or a thug living in Mordant. And each one has a what they know section, a what they want section, and some other info about what they're like and how to roleplay them, essentially. Players are welcome to decide how they look, their gender, and potentially their species, how they died, plus some potential modifications. And each one has unfinished business, and there's dedicated appendix section for that as well. Chapter 1, they find themselves in the manifestations of their spirit adventurers. Got good flavour for Mordentshire, which is the town in Mordent, terrain, weather, lighting, sounds and smells, and flavour the house on Griffin Hill, the infamous manor house that's home to the domain's Darklord. It also says, the house and grounds appear abandoned unless viewed from the border ethereal, which the characters have access to, as they have the etherealness action. At which point the Darklord's nature becomes readily apparent. Hundreds upon hundreds of ghosts wander the grounds, internally stranded, searching for rest that they'll never achieve. Similar to the info in Curse of Strahd, it says that they have etherealness, but they can't leave the domains of dread. They can only get as far as the border ethereal and then they're pulled back to the domain. The art of them approaching a haunted house is actually from Ghosts of Saltmarsh I spotted. It explains that nearby all the ghosts were casualties of Lord Godefroy's accidental mass murder of all the residents of Mordentshire by means of the apparatus. Grim. No matter what entrance they try, the ghosts try to stop them and moving is treated like difficult terrain. Each spirit adventurer is approached by ghosts twice. An Appendix D contains ghostly encounter suggestions, e.g. it's someone they knew, a ghost who requires aid, and so on. There's info on how to handle combat, exploration, and social encounters in this section as well. Appendix A contains more room info for different parts of the manor, so if you're running Griffin Hill, could be handy. There's a gaining an audience section, which has terrain, lighting, sound, smell info. And once you're inside the house, the Rod of Hotrus, part of the apparatus, is visible in the border ethereal as a crystalline white glow. It can be seen from anywhere in the house, even through physical obstacles reflected in the ethereal, such as walls and floors. Jen in Grey Castle, a wraith, stands attentive in the foyer, a confident presence in a crisp tuxedo. That's a nice flavour. And there's an NPC info for him. Spirit adventurers must ask for an audience with the Darklord, so they can ask for the Rod of Hotrus, or try and get the rod. There's a charisma check with potential for advantage if they show interest in his predicament, which is that he wants to be released from Godefroy's service. It doesn't look like there's info about what to do if everyone fails the check though, like, I guess they've got to try and sneak past or fight the Wraith. If all good, they're good to explore, and Appendix B contains quirks and encounters, including encounters with carronets, a giant spider, a ghoul, or 2 animated armors. Some of the quirks are cool as well. Chairs, couches, and tables creep slowly around the room. If remarked upon, they stop where they are. A cracked mirror on the wall shows only a little girl who mimics your movements. That's creepy. And there's 8 more. Chapter 2, they meet the Darklord, Lord Godefroy. He's the ghost stat block, and there's info for him plus stuff the players can learn, such as about the rod. They can get it by doing some mini quests for him. I quote, pests around the manor, he's too important to remove himself. If they can distract him, they can try and sneak off with it, or they can make a deal. He might say that he'll give the rod in return for a future favour from Alanic Ray, for example. As for dealing with the rod, they can't handle it themselves because they're ghosts. So the module encourages the players to get creative. They could use something like Mage Hand, or ask Godefroy's mortal groundskeeper to carry it for them, stuff like that. Chapter 3, a strange cleric who's, quote, seemingly mortal, intercepts them as they try to get the rod back to Heather House. He can see the spirit adventurers even though they're spectral. His name's Tiffin, but the art they used for him is Leaf from Curse of Strahd, just FYI. He'll ask for the rod and will teleport away with it if it's given to him, but if the spirit adventurers refuse, he attacks. Tiffin's stat block is interesting. It's basically a cleric boss, and I like cleric bosses. I ran one when I ran Tovag. Legendary actions include Turn Undead, which means the spirit adventurers because they are undead. Radiant Burst, a self-healing spell. We can cast a cantrip. 3 legendary resistances. A bunch of cleric spells, including Spiritual Weapon. Can do 3 ghostly spear attacks, which do piercing and radiant damage. Death isn't final. Any spirit adventure reduced to 0 hit points instantly breaks apart into mist. It takes them 1 round to coalesce back into their summoned form or at half hit points, or 2 rounds to coalesce with full hit points. They can still assist other spirit adventurers with skill checks while they coalesce. Once the spirit adventurers reach the gates of Heather House, their characters return to their own bodies, find themselves around the seance table, and have recovered the rod if they were successful. It says, looks of satisfaction wash over the spirits as one by one they fade from view. Oh, how sweet. It says, Alanic and the weathermay-foxgrove twins congratulate them whether or not they got hold of the rod. So that potentially affects the story in the future, with the rod coming into play later if they don't get it. I do like the idea of this module and playing the whole Spirit Adventurers thing. My players have been to Mordent a few times, and I did consider a confrontation with Godefroy at Griffin Hill. Might use some of this, even do the whole Spirit Adventurers thing, we'll see. The last main module, not counting the extended play, is RMH 12, Beneath the New Star. Looking forward to reading this one and the next one, as they're both set in Darkon, and I'm running Darkon as the finale in my own campaign for my own players. Back in Alec's house in Damonlu, He charges the characters with going to Aslan's fortress, Castle Avernus, in search of the Darklord's whereabouts. They're given a bone compass magic item, which while you're tuned to it, gives you resistance to necrotic damage, and undead have disadvantaged attack rolls against you. That's super powerful. I can see the players fighting over who gets to have that. As an action, you can command the compass to point towards an undead or group of undead within 120 feet. Needle swings around, pointing to each undead, changing color based on strength relative to you. Green donates an easy or medium encounter, red, hard, or deadly. Sounds a bit like a bit of a DM's headache to me, but I like the idea of it. But it's cursed. Spells and abilities affect or target undead also affect and target you. While tuned to it, you don't regain hit points when you complete a long rest or when you spend hit dice at the end of a short rest. Ouch, that's painful. But I suppose, the whole disadvantage against you from undead and resistance to necrotic damage helps to balance that out a bit. Chapter 1 is called Lichgate. The characters arrive in Lichgate in Darkon and behold the devastation that followed in the wake of the Hour of Ascension. Ahead, visible from afar on its mountain peak, the exploded ruin of Castle Avernus hangs in the air, suspended by powerful magic. The golden light of the King's Tear shines down from the night sky. There's info for Lichgate, the usual terrain, sound, smells, lighting, weather info. As they approach the castle, they see a dark winged shape, that's Ebishith, a dragon, we'll talk more about her in a bit, soaring above the castle, plus 3 will-o-wisps floating around its ruins. You see Ebb land in the castle's ruins, and then there's info on how the will-o-wisps behave and what happens if the PCs attack them. PCs have to choose whether to go through a floating rock field or trek through the Shroud. The Shroud is kind of like the whole deal with Darkon in Van Richten's Guide, is that the mist is kind of creeping inwards into the domain, and it's called the Shroud, and bad things can happen if you go in the Shroud. Different things can happen depending on which one they choose, if they go through the Shroud or through the floating rock field. And depending on what happens, they either suffer damage or a level of stress. Stress is from Van Richten's Guide. They see some figures run towards a mausoleum. It's a farmer with 2 skeletons. And the PCs can choose to chase them or not. And if they chase them, there's a chase encounters complications thing like we've had before. If caught, he calls for the half-elf noble leader Anastasia, who has another 12 skeletons. She was Aslan's majordomo who fled with other servants to avoid the power struggle following Aslan's disappearance. She name drops Elzabeth, an unliving necromancer, and Samiel, an elf oathbreaker, who both vie for the position of regent in Aslan's absence. She fears a purge if either consolidate their power, or when Ebb inevitably grows tired of their fighting. If they make it inside, they can meet the ghost of Eric Zalhonen, the son of Aslan Rex. He can give them some info about Aslan, Ebb, the other 3 new NPCs, and what they might be able to find at the ruins of Castle Avernus. There's also a secret passage from Eric's tomb to the castle they might be able to find as well. Chapter 2, Castle Avernus. PCs must make their way through floating rooms and flying corridors to the ballroom where Ebb sleeps, in the hopes that the dragon can tell them where Aslan went and what his plans actually are. Usual terrain, sound, smell, lighting, weather info, plus info about gravity currents means you can't fly from room to room. In your face, flying PCs. The PCs participate in 1 encounter and 1 trap as they navigate the ruins. There's 3 traps and you can roll a d6 to see which one you get. Bone room is glass chambers, each containing magical bones that explode and do necrotic damage, but it's like a trigger chain reaction effect. If you trigger one, they all go off. Chamber of wounds, dead bodies around a statue of Aslan. There's pressure plates, which if triggered can do necrotic damage and cause another point of stress. It turns out one of the dead bodies is actually still alive, and if you help them, they can give you some info. Death scarabs. Corridor with vats. The vats contain scarabs. If a tripwire is triggered, there's a lot of scarabs. And there's 3 potential encounters with different people. There's a sword wraith warrior in the laboratory. There's Elzabeth, the Deathlock mastermind stat block in the library. The PCs can pretend to be one of her acolytes. Or if they agree to kill Samiel, that's her rival, she'll get them safe passage. And she summons an invisible stalker to take them to Samiel. Or the 3rd encounter is Samiel, who's a blackguard in the temple. Similarly, they can pretend to be one of his cultists. And if they agree to capture Elzabeth, his rival, he'll give them safe passage, and he gives them an armor golem, which is the same stat block as Strahd's animated armor from Curse of Strahd, in order to help them. And they might get hold of something called Star Shard, which is a sunblade, but the downside of using it is it risks blinding the wielder if they roll a natural 1 and then fail a con save. Then they find Ebb in the ballroom. She's an ancient black shadow dragon, wow, and a stat block is provided for her. There's a fair bit of information here, but the crux of it is she's bored without Aslan and concerned that if he's disappeared, Aslan will cease to exist. So she wants to find him, bring him back, stop him if he's plotting an escape from the domain. She also asks him to deliver a dagger to Alcio Metis, that's the leader of the Karjat. And that's it. They return to Daemonlu to update Alnic. It also says that whoever took the dagger finds the dagger gone the next morning, but they have a new tattoo on their arm in the shape of a dagger, and I got a feeling that might play into the next adventure. Now, onto the final part. RMH EP2, a Darklord's Denouement. I'm excited about this one because it's mostly focused on the King's Tier, which will likely be the final dungeon in my campaign. King's Tier is shining red. Laurie, weathermay-foxgrove and Alnic are there, and Laurie says something about the domain is dying. And Ebb is there as well, and she offers to ferry people to the False Star. Their goal, to destroy Aslan's phylactery and stop him using the apparatus. Chapter 1, the King's Tier. Box text from Alnic, I love this. I was born in Darkon, Alnic says. It's where I learned the science of detection. Where Arthur and I built our life together. It's a little exaggeration to say I now trust you with everything I hold dear. Save our home. I'm not crying. Ebb takes them to the King's Tier by, I love this, putting them in a boat, okay? And then she carries the boat as she flies. But the star, quote marks, has a solid surface that becomes liquid ooze when touched. She essentially places the boat on it and then flies away. There's info about the outside of the star's dimension, terrain, lighting, weather, and info for sinking into it. If and when the PCs jump off the boat and sink into it, Eric pulls them out and inside to the star properly. They enter a crystalline maze, a labyrinth filled with alternative realities. They must learn the secrets of these mirror dimensions to find Aslan. It also says just before entering a mirror dimension, the characters see an image reflected in the crystalline amber walls. A young man in mage's robes with long dark hair, framing an angular face, wearing a chain with a tiny gold dragon skull. He says, "I've been expecting you." He then snaps his fingers and briefly becomes a lich in red robes with a golden crown before everything vanishes and the characters find themselves in the mirror dimension. The mage fits Radiger's description of Fran Salhonen perfectly. There are 6 mirror dimension missions. They must complete 2 to escape the maze. But before it explains the missions, it gives info of treasures that can be earned if they succeed on 1 and then 2 missions. Mechanics for amber tendrils that can grab them if they end a turn incapacitated or prone. There's a whole thing about a cutscene with Fran/Aslan if they're grabbed and taken away in this way. And they may be a flesh golem now, something like that. And also how a successful Arcana or Insight check might mean they can conjure up a piece of Adventurer's gear or a spell effect given the dreamlike or nightmare-like state. And similarly, they can also wake themselves up from it as a group check, but it'll probably mean they fail the mission. Mission 1 is called The Test. In a classroom with a young Ferran and young Eric, this being Ferran's brother, not his son, he named his son after his brother. The characters are essentially their classmates, and they have 1 hour to cast a spell which summons a demon called a Nalfeshni. This reminds me of the novel King of the Dead. It's probably what they're basing this all on. There is a dragonborn prisoner called Dulcinea. I believe that's who they're there to free, and she's imprisoned because dragonborn blood is required for the ritual. Mission 2, riddle me this. There's a hallway. They see a red door with a number 22 on it. They see the Darkon city of Il Aluk through the windows. And then it says, beyond the door is a sphinx who seemingly only requires the answer to a simple riddle to pass. She's a gyno sphinx, and if they fight her, she has legendary actions, and their actions it tells you she should use. No matter what answer they give to the riddle, even if it's correct, she says they're wrong. So presumably they just have to defeat her. It's inevitable is going to be combat in order to try and succeed on this mission, or they can just collectively rouse themselves out of it to get out. Mission 3, hashing things up. This area resembles the grounds of the Collegium Caelestis, a university on the shores of Lake Korst. Instead of the university's legendary observatory, however, the characters stand before massive crystalline amber scales, each plate holding group of shadowy figures. One group holds only illusions. The characters must choose the group that has even one real person. And there's 2 levers, so they can choose which group to free. Sounds as though they can't make out the 2 groups, only that the 2 groups are making rude gestures to each other, and they can also hear the cries of familiar voices. I think it says something about asking the players to name 2 family members or people important to them, so it's possible that those are the voices they're meant to hear. There's also a red dragon, which I believe is disguised as the person, who asks them to free the one she's in, and then they succeed if they free the one with the red dragon in it. Mission 4, a grisly end. The PC's creature type changes to undead, and they're on a bloodstained and foggy battlefield facing the endless onslaught of undead foes who look like the PCs. Starts off with 3 whites and 3 zombies, then each successive wave is 5 whites. If the characters fight 3 waves of enemies without noticing they are fighting undead copies of themselves, or that they themselves are undead, they gain 1 level of exhaustion, fail the mission, wake up back in the maze. And they succeed the mission if they discover one or both facts. Mission 5, Try Let's See. The characters enter a twisted memory of the trial that ended in Azalin/Faran executing his son Eric aboard a warship at sea. Those who know Darkon recognize the Sea of Souls as well as Matera Bay, 1,000 feet off the portside bow. Azalin/Faran asks if anyone will advocate for the prisoner. There's another prisoner, Sir Bresden, who's seen this played out 1,000 times before, and he wants to help, but no one can see or hear him. But the PCs can see and hear him. Gasp! There's a Gaunt Cavalier, a Death Knight, cool, but with a scythe who's essentially death by sounds of it. Cool, cool, cool. Sir Bresden can give info on Darkon's laws. For example, Eric could request trial by combat instead. And the mission succeeds if Eric is spared or freed. It says that Eric is admitted to releasing the prisoners, which is his crime, but on some level, Faran wants to spare Eric. PCs can convince Faran to imprison him instead of executing him. It's a DC 30, but it gives ideas and info of ways it can be reduced by 5 each time, up to a total of 25. Imagine reducing it to DC 5 and then rolling a natural 1, that would suck. Otherwise, there's trial by combat, where the Death Knight becomes a Doulahan, and if they defeat it, Eric lives. Or it suggests keeping it as Death Knight if you want to make it harder, if you've got lots of players, but it won't use its Hellfire Orb ability on the ship, because it's a ship. Mission 6, The City on the Edge of Oblivion. I like these titles. This mirror dimension tries to persuade the characters that their mission has already failed. Laurie and Radiga approach saying questions that don't make sense. For example, did you get the key to the abyss? Radiga theorizes they've lost their memories. It says to give players handout 3, which is kind of included at the back with all the appendices, listing events they missed because of this mirror dimension's false history. The attempt to stop Azalin failed and Darkon was consumed by the mists, but the area they're in hasn't been destroyed, but it will be soon. They succeed if they deny the false reality and awaken as a group, or if any of the survivors escape Darkon, or they enact a plan to create a new Darklord. Natalia the werewolf, a loup-garou in this, could be a candidate, but Laurie doesn't like the idea and wants no part of it. There's also a possible encounter with the Whistling Fiend, who splits into multiple Babao demons. Cool. That's the 6 missions. Once 2 are successfully completed, they move on to Chapter 2, The Apparatus. They see the dark-haired mage, Faran. Roll initiative and make sure the players know they must hurry. Any warlock character who has a Darklord as their patron gains advantage on initiative, unless their patron is Azalin himself, which imposes disadvantage. That is amazing. I love that so much. It's so funny. All the characters hear a ghostly voice, that's Eric, tell them that the gold skull is the phylactery the characters must destroy. Azalin is possessed in the body in a cocoon, and Faran is in a flesh golem body with tweaks, which explains who is getting the apparatus ready. He also has his imp familiar Skiva. Gives info on what happens each round for 4 rounds, with Azalin winning if it gets to round 4, plus events that take place at initiative 20, 15 and 10 each round. There's area info plus info for the phylactery, its AC and HP, the cocoon and the apparatus. And it can play out differently depending on what was or wasn't obtained in the previous adventures. So if Azalin does or doesn't have the Scion of Darkness from Valachan, the Rod from Mordent and the Urn from Ikath. And after that battle, Chapter 3 is Escape. The King's Tier is collapsing and falling out of the sky. It says to roll initiative, everyone gets 1 turn to brace themselves before the King's Tier hits the ground. There's a dex save and 66 bludgeoning damage. Mist comes out of the apparatus, but it's not ordinary mist, it specifies, that consumes everything it touches. As they escape, each round more fragments from the collapsing crystalline maze can hurt the PCs, and both the DC and damage increases each time. And the shroud expands each turn too, up to 250 feet after 7 rounds. So it encourages the PCs to dash, and for you as the DM to use the chase rules from the Dungeon Master's Guide. A creature that enters the shroud for the first time or starts its turn there takes 100 or 5d12 plus 17 necrotic damage, and reduces its hit point maximum by the same amount. Characters killed in this way rises at the start of its next turn as an Alep under the DM's control. Wow. And the Alcio's dagger thing from the previous module comes back into it, where Ebb comes and takes the personal people away who helped with that to repay the debt to them. There's a wrap-up section called Endgame, and there's 3 possible outcomes. Azalin fails, Alnick wants to meet over dinner and a glass of port, you all share stories and there's handshakes all around. Azalin succeeds, the PCs basically witness Darkon being destroyed. Alnick and Cabe are there and they're like, oh well, it's been an honour, friends. And then it's essentially everyone disintegrated like the disintegration effect. Grim. And the third possible outcome is similar to Azalin's success, but for those who helped Ebb gets them to safety, but at a cost. Other people die. Not everyone is saved. And lastly, the epilogue. Box text to read out regardless of whether Azalin won or lost, which talks about how an unnamed figure in a warehouse carrying a crate containing familiar sounding items such as a tattered threadbare haversack a bone-hafted spear, a leather-wrapped decanter stopped with a cobalt glass, and a battered-looking machete are put in a crate in a gap on a shelf, and as that person leaves, they spot an ancient tome made of flesh. As they reach for it, it hurls itself at them. They drop their lantern, and all is silent and dark. Spooky. Kind of reminds me of that final scene, and I think it's the first Indiana Jones movie where it's like this warehouse with like all this sort of famous stuff in it. Kind of reminds me of that, but with that classic Ravenloft Gothic spin. And that's it. The end. My final thoughts on Ravenloft Misthunters. It's great flavour for various domains. All the sort of terrain, weather, sound, smell type stuff is invaluable, I think. It's got good monster, NPC, and quest suggestions beyond what's in Van Richten's guide. I feel like Van Richten's guide gives some good stuff, but this helps to flesh it out a bit more. I like the with a gothic spin type elements. So magic items with a catch or that are cursed, or both. Occasional dark gifts, and the Misty Visions table, which I didn't talk about in this one, but I talked about in the first video, where every time they enter a domain, you're meant to roll on the table and there's potential disadvantages. Some of it felt a bit rushed, and some parts of it felt incomplete or unresolved, or didn't make sense. Or it didn't tell you what to do if certain criteria didn't succeed. Like I said, I used parts 9 and 10 for my Valachan game, and it worked really well. I feel it's a good stuff to incorporate into a Ravenloft campaign, or if you're doing a Ravenloft one-shot for one of the domains of Dread it covers, I think it's really handy. Is it worth the price? Possibly not, especially since they put the prices up recently. I think it used to be closer to $7 per module, but now it's $10. Unless you're running a domain long term and want as much info as possible. If you're only running ICATH, for example, for 2 sessions, probably not. If you're running ICATH for a dozen sessions, probably. Probably wouldn't suggest running Ravenloft Misthunters as an end-to-end adventure. But obviously you could do if you wanted to. And that was obviously its intention initially. I just think it's handy for borrowing stuff and adding it to your own game rather than using it all as is. That's it for this one. Thank you for watching. I hope that was easy enough to follow along. I hope I've given a good flavour of what they're included without breaking any sort of copyright rules by basically telling you all about it. I figure if anyone at WotC's watching this, hey, I'm helping you to convince people to buy these things. So, or at least that's the way I feel about it anyway. And speaking of Adventurers League stuff, because this was the Ravenloft Adventurers League stuff, I believe we're getting more Adventurers League stuff when The Horrors Within comes out in June. So hopefully we'll have some more, and maybe I'll do some videos covering that as well. And there's also some Adventurers League stuff for Curse of Strahd, which I haven't covered yet, but plan to in a future video. So if you're into Curse of Strahd, I believe that's got like another settlement that you can add to Barovia, which is pretty cool. And some more information and flavour similar to these modules. And we leave it there. Thank you, Miss Wanderers.